So, are we ready to go?
Yeah.
Okay, so welcome everybody, and I am very happy indeed to have this opportunity to introduce Tulku Sherdor to you for a session of kind of, we'll see where it goes, questions and answers. I feel very honoured and very.
You, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I feel very honoured that Tulku Sherdor has actually gone out of his way to come and talk to us. He's come from America, especially. Then he's going on to Portugal, and I'm really delighted. I think we met about 5 years ago in the States at a Buddhist teachers conference, and I ended up being given a lift back up to your place on my way to visit Elizabeth Callahan, and so we had a very nice trip in the car. I had him all to myself to talk to all afternoon, which was wonderful, and we've met from time to time since then in Nepal. And I remember when I first, like it is when you've met someone the first time, you're trying to kind of get a sense of who they are and who am I talking to. And he kept saying, well, you just have to read my book. You don't need to go into that. You can read my book, which is called A Path Strewn with Flowers and Bones. So, if you want to know more about him, you can read his book. But actually, it's not all in the book. There's a lot else besides. It's quite a remarkable life story, and it's for me it's very significant that he has many of the same connections that I have, Dharma connections. And when you ask me, like, who are we? How do we fit into the whole Buddhist world, as it were? I tell you, well, you're Kagyu Nyingmas, and why? Because your teachers are. And so here's another Kagyu Nyingma, somebody who's trained in both the Kagyu and Nyingma traditions. And he was very young. I think, was it about before you were 20? You met Urgyen Tulku?
Yes.
Yes, before he was 20, he met Urgyen Tulku. Some of you are familiar with that wonderful book, Blazing Splendor. And then some of you also may be aware that his sons include some of the lamas that we're often talking about, like Chögyam Nyima Rinpoche and Mingyur Rinpoche and Tsonyi Rinpoche, and actually one of his other sons, Choling Rinpoche, his son is the new Chensu Yangtze. So it's a whole...
It's all in the family.
It's all in the family, yeah. So it feels very... it feels quite wonderful to have this connection. Chögyam Nyima Rinpoche is always very keen that when he sees me, he says, "Oh, you're a scholar and you're a practitioner, and you must come and help my Dharma centers." And then, of course, Sherdorji, Tulku Sherdor is doing that. He's helping. He's been working with Chögyam Nyima Rinpoche for many years, helping at his Dharma centers and teaching his own students alongside Chögyam Nyima Rinpoche's students. And that was your original thing that made you think you would be coming here this time, wasn't it? You were going to visit South Wales.
Well, anything is possible.
Yes, but actually we're getting all to ourselves, which is very special. And I'm just going to have a quick look at things I wanted to say that I thought were very significant from our point of view. I mean, there's other things that are very significant because just they are. But, but from our point of view, there's two texts that are very important to us. One is the third Karmapa's Mahamudra prayer, and Tulku Sherdor actually was the one who translated the Situ commentary, the text and the commentary, so that a very special commentary, very interesting commentaries, so that I hope we're going to talk about that a bit this afternoon. And then also he's translated the Mipam text of the White Lotus, about commenting on the 7-line prayer and how, the deeper meanings of the 7-line prayer, which is another remarkable text, which we're very inspired by. In fact, he's been translating since very young, and it's quite impressive because he did his. I think he did a year with Jeffrey Hopkins before he actually went into the 3-year retreat at Wappinger Falls. And of course, that was under the direction of Kalu Rinpoche, so that's that other connection. And then, of course, that drew lamas like Bokor Rinpoche, that connection. And Khenpo Tsutin Gyaltsen Rinpoche would go there and spend, weeks or a month at a time, teaching them various texts. And one particular transmission he gave them all was the 5 Dharmas of Maitreya, which we've been talking about as being very important and significant for us. So there's all these very significant connections there. So what can I extract from these stories? Oh, well, that's Urgin Tulku, Kalu Rinpoche, and Khenpo Rinpoche, Bokor Rinpoche, Khenpo Rinpoche. But then in 1997, if I get it right, you met Urgin Kusum Lingpa.
Yes.
And this is, I think in your book, you say this was the most important relationship in your life by far. This is Kusum, a very famous Tertan, who, and his son, Honka Rinpoche, you also have a strong connection with him. Right. Yes. And in fact, it was Urgin Kusum Lingpa who announced to him that he was to be enthroned as a Tulku in Tibet. And he had to translate this as it was being announced. Very important Tulku here. How do I translate that here? And so that's his adventures in Tibet, that you just have to read them to kind of really get the sense of them. But so what he spends his time doing now, as far as I can work out, is he's kind of doing a lot of traveling. He's based in on the Hudson River with his wife and daughter Rinchin, who and he has a center there called the Blazing Wisdom Institute, and that was founded by Kusum Lingpa. Yes, it was called Kilaya Sherab Mebaling. Yeah. So
next year will be 20 years actually.
Wow, and a special dedication to Dorji Drolop, or at least there was some special connection with Dorji Drolop.
Drolu and Kilaya.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So he, as I said, he's really a very in great demand, I would imagine, as a translator. I mean, he's translated for the Karmapas of the Dalai Lama and for various lamas, which you can get from the book. But I'm sure there's others as well that you haven't really mentioned. So he's right at the heart of things, and what he finds, he's been talking these last few days, we've been talking about the Dharma in the West, and time and again I get the sense that he's really working behind the scenes to help different sanghas by helping the teachers of the sanghas to get the training they need at the right moment. As he said, it seems to turn up at the right moment when something is needed that he can help with, and then he gives really significant help, and already he's given me a great deal of significant help. So it's already successful, this. And there's still some days to go. So Yeah, it's for me, this is the greatest joy of my life, to find somebody I can ask my questions to and have a proper conversation about it. Like, okay, I heard that, but is it what I think it is that I just heard? And really, without a conversation, I never really feel satisfied. That I'm not quite. I don't want to feel I'm making it up. I'm assuming I've understood that it's something that I haven't understood. So it's fantastic to have colleagues, and that's what drives me to build a sangha for you, so that you will have colleagues and you will be able to have these conversations. And now you'll be able to have conversations with Tulku Sherdor, which is absolutely fantastic. So I think that's enough from me for now. Oh no, there's something else he was telling us in the car that was really interesting, which was how he's also helping in these ashrams. There's I don't know what's the name. Shivananda. Ashram. There's the head of that in the Bahamas. Their main center is in the Bahamas, and they've adopted him as their lama. And so he goes there and he's training their acharyas, so that sort of filling in where they feel they need some input from the Tibetan tradition, which is extremely interesting. And and I think it speaks volumes about all sorts of things about the nature of the Dharma and transmission.
Yeah, we could easily talk just about that.
We could. So over to you, if you want to begin.
First of all, thank you for that very warm, kind, probably excessive kind introduction. The gist of which is that I've obviously been around for a while, doing this as best I can. And I like the fact that you invited me to have a conversation today rather than do something more formal or scripted or prepared, because my own feeling is that if it's not fresh and interesting and nutritious to me, it probably wouldn't be either for the people I'm meeting. So I don't carry around a little basket of dried Dharma chestnuts that I hand out wherever I go, which always taste the same. So I like to say that any topic, like any text or any subject matter, I like to teach it at most 3 times, because by the 3rd time, it's about as good as it's going to get for me in understanding and sharing it. And after that, it would just be repeating myself. So it's time to go on to something else. So like that, try to keep it very living and fresh. It's also a little bit challenging because we all think we're native English speakers, but sometimes it turns out to be a little different than you think. And culture is not always exactly the same, and groups of people and their dynamics are not always the same. So the first time you meet people, like you alluded to, there's a little bit of a feeling out period. So I might think I just said something tremendously wry and amusing and meet with stone-faced silence, or vice versa. You never know. So let's just be relaxed and comfortable together and have a meaningful conversation. Yeah.
Well, I noticed you lit up when I started talking about the Shivananda, and I wonder if there's
I had a thought at lunchtime today, because we've been talking about this on and off for the past few days, and it was the comment I made the other day is that the more time I spend working within the Sangha, literally, they think of themselves as a monastic community, which also has many lay participants, just like the Buddhist groups do around the world. As I work with them more and more, and I think, well, what you're doing right now, or what you're saying, the way you're behaving, the way you are thinking about something, at first it looks like it's not the same as what I think and what I say and what I do, but then with just a little bit of like refraction through some kind of lens, I can see it's almost a reflection. It's almost exactly the same thing. So that makes it very easy to have deep discussions with them about Dharma, because they're practitioners and they do sadhana and they understand the principles of deity and devotion and service and all the same things that we talk about in our tradition. So it's quite workable. But the specific thought I had today was, when I was first learning Buddhism, one of the ways traditionally you're taught Buddhism in a very traditional way is to say, it's not like this other school and it's not like this other tradition. So here's what Hindus believe that we don't believe, and here's what we understand that they haven't figured out yet, and all this kind of, bias. And so one of the things you would hear if you went to see some traditional Lama in Nepal or India in 1975 or 80 is that, they have these deities like, Ganesh and this one and that, Hanuman, da, 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 da. And we don't consider those to be, true wisdom deities. In fact, our deities are stamping down on the heads of those deities and this kind of stuff. Then, as scholarship has improved over the subsequent few decades, I saw an article maybe a month ago where someone said there are actually 8 sadhanas of Ganesh in the Buddhist Tenjo, where the Indian masters who composed the authoritative treatises on the Buddhist canon, on the scripture, treated them just like, Chenrezig or Tara or anybody else that we relate to as expressions of wisdom. They have Ganesh and Shiva and Brahma and all this, and Agni Deva, the god of fire. There's no such thing as Buddhist and non-Buddhist deities in the original yogic traditions in India, of which, Buddhism was one school or one branch, and, Saivism was another, and, then there was Advaita or non-dual Vedanta tradition and so on. So it makes you really think about what are the key points. What are the key points? Because if they're really the key points, as Khenpo Sutram used to say to us all the time, if it's the truth, then it is just the truth. And there's not like 2 ultimate truths, or neither would be the ultimate truth. It's a very logical kind of point. So if there are definitive points about the nature of mind and the path and process by which we can realize the nature of mind or the nature of being, then that would have to be true no matter whether you are nominally Buddhist or Hindu or Christian or Jewish or anything else. And so as you go deeper and deeper, what becomes more important is to see the non-biased, definitive nature of things. And now a plug, which is one reason why one of the main activities in which I'm involved nowadays is what we call the non-sectarian Tibetan Buddhist Peace Prayer Gathering, or Rime Monam, and that's the reason I'm going to Portugal after this. We're having our 10th annual Peace Prayer Gathering, which includes all of the major Dharma traditions of Tibet. We're not too ambitious. We're not including other schools of Buddhism and so on. Let's get our own neighborhood working together, and then we can expand, kind of thing. So, and that, I should say, was originally founded by Hunkar Dorje at our monastery in Tibet in 2004. And in 2005, I attended in Tibet a 5-day this peace prayer gathering with all the clergy. And I attended every year thereafter for about 4 or 5 years, maybe 6 years. And pretty soon he asked me to translate the entire book of the liturgy.
Can you explain more what the Monam is?
I will, sure. So then we started doing it in New York in 2007, and this is the 10th anniversary. First time in Europe. This is a ceremony or ritual where everybody together recites many aspiration prayers, pranidhana, like the ones with which many of you are familiar, the aspiration for excellent conduct, Charyabhadra, the many important sutras that are universal. Longzhung Dorje's prayer is not there. No.
I see, right.
No. But aspirations for the expansion of all of the major Dharma lineages, and His Holiness Dalai Lama's prayer for the general development of Dharma in the world, and many important Mahayana sutras like the Heart Sutra and many others. And it's all centered around a liturgy, which in the case of our prayer gathering is a liturgy of Manjushri, which led me to this project and the Manjushri book, which is my most recent. Yeah. When we get together and all align our hearts and minds and voices and intentions, it's an extremely powerful spiritual practice and extremely powerful human activity. Because we spend a lot of time in life not doing that. There's a lot of scattering, competition, rivalry, jealousy, pride, miserliness, etc., all of the forces of mind, personality, culture that keep us separated and somewhat antagonistic. And so the Munlam, or the aspiration prayer gathering, is an incredibly powerful force for healing, for creating harmony, and its effects are widespread. I find it very, very powerful. And people who have shown up out of the blue to participate for whatever reason at some of these prayer gatherings have, after 5 days, repeatedly remarked that they had no idea what a powerful effect it would have on them to be in that environment, directing their intentions in a positive way for just that short period of time. So it's very powerful.
So how many days is it?
It varies between 3 and 5, usually. Between 3 and 5 days. Yeah.
And so, and it starts immediately you leave here?
It starts on the 16th of this month, ends on the 20th. And we'll be broadcasting online also, so you can go to my website for the links.
So we can at least do that.
You can certainly do that.
Yeah.
And you're in the same time zone, which makes it easier.
Yes, yes. And where's it planned for next year?
Here?
I see. So how many people
This
are you
is called
expecting?
skillful means.
How many people are you expecting?
This year? I'm not sure, maybe 60 or 70.
Right. So it's not impossible. Oh, you've sown a seed there. You've sown a seed there.
Right. This is what I did last year in Portugal.
Wow. Yes. So there were various places where we've been sort of going in our conversations these last few days. And one of the places I would really like to hear from you again is teaching meditation in the West and all that implies, and the whole issue about transmission and the real essence of our tradition, if you like, the Mahamudra Dzogchen tradition, which kind of leads us into Guru Yoga. So I think there's no, I mean, we ended up saying that was the essence of it all. I'd really like to hear you, what inspires you to talk about
so
that whole area.
Where should we start with meditation?
Perhaps that's a good place to start, yeah.
So one of the conclusions I've reached, both through my own practice and from working with so many different kinds of people and so many different kinds of groups of people over the years, is that although it's a traditional way of talking about meditation, to start with calm abiding or shamatha shine meditation as if it's a category of meditation unto itself, that first you stabilize to some degree before you go on to explore more advanced levels or stages of meditation. In fact, it makes more sense to both experientially and in talking about meditation to think that there is no such thing as calm abiding meditation without a very crucial element of vipassana or penetrative insight or superior insight meditation. And this is very simple. This is not complicated. you're instructed to pick your topic, your focal point of meditation. It could be a statue of the Buddha or Tara. It could be your breath. It could be many different things, candle flame. And then don't let your mind wander. So what happens? Your mind only wanders, right? And then the instruction is notice that it's wandering and then bring it back to where you've decided to put it in the first place. Oh, and by the way, that's called smrti. That's called drenpa. That's called recollection. Mindfulness. Oh, I forgot. Now I remember what I was supposed to do. Where does that come from? We assume that it's there, but what is it? What is that quality? What is the forgetting and what is the remembering? Once you start asking yourself in your process of trying to learn just calm abiding meditation, what is this getting lost? And what is it that all of a sudden is the remembering that I was lost and coming back? You see that that element is already vipassana. It's already vipassana. It's an insight into a self-knowing insight into the process of what is happening in your experience rather than just being immersed in the content of your experience. That self-knowing quality that is always available in the mind is, you can say, it's the root of insight or penetrative insight. Vipassana, you can say it's the quality of prajna. What do you say for prajna typically?
Prajna.
Yeah, that's easy. That's what I used to do.
And you now, what do you do now?
I mostly do that. If it's a text, I'll say sublime cognition or something buzzword sounding, but prajna technically means the most general definition is that faculty of mind that knows its object precisely, right? A clear and precise recognition of the object or the qualities or nature of the object is prajna. But here I'm using it in a more specific sense to mean that a quality of our own mind that doesn't just know something, but knows that it is knowing that thing. That self-knowing or self-cognizant, self-aware quality that's always available and always built into the way our minds work is what we are trying to access or invoke when we practice meditation and are telling ourselves, don't get lost. Oh, but I did just get lost and now I need to go back. Because you're looking at what is happening to your cognition itself. You're not just looking at the objects of your experience. You've already forgotten the candle flame or the Buddha or whatever. So that's not what reminds you, right? That's not what reminds you. It's something internal to your own mind. You agree with me so far? Mm-hmm. Okay. So then the question becomes, now that we sort of understand that this process of coming back to awareness of what's happening in our mind has a vipassana aspect or has a self-knowing aspect, it brings us to ask, what made us lose it in the first place? Where did it go? Why did we forget? What actually happens in our mind when we tell ourselves we're just supposed to do something at any given time? What happens such that we forget? And we forget that we have forgotten. Right? What is that? What is being lost and what is being gained when we remember again? And is that something that we do, or is it something that just happens to us? When we say, I remember that I forgot to just look at the Buddha, is there something that happened before that verbalization in the mind of, oh, now I remember that I forgot? Is there an initial moment where a light clicks back on and then we say, oh, now I realize I forgot? And what is that? And when the light goes out and we're again just lost in some story or some drama about the past or the future or some knee pain or this or that, where did it go? How is it that we lost sight of that, the continuity of that self-aware, that vigilant, or that you could say presence of mind, right? I like that term, the presence of mind. Mind being present with itself. The more you investigate this as part of your basic training in meditation, the better you will understand the nature of distraction and of mindfulness, of forgetfulness and remembering. And the less it will feel like your meditation is just some huge pitched battle between two opposing forces. You know, as if the forgetting part is something other than you that you are fighting to trounce and defeat forever and bury underground, right? So there's always an interplay, or if not a unity, of calm abiding and penetrative insight in order for meditation experience to develop. That's my view or my approach, which makes people feel like it's an interesting challenge, something to investigate and see about how their own minds work, and not this, again, this epic battle that they're fighting against distractedness as if that's an external force of some kind. So should we talk about this? Yeah. What is it that makes us distracted? What actually happens?
It makes me think of the Ivam principle, just it's the natural ebb and flow of things. My simple answer, or thought anyway, not an answer.
That sounds kind of Taoist. Like where there's light, there's dark, and this, like that?
Yeah, I suppose.
So can the forces of light conquer the forces of darkness, or is there always going to be some balance?
Well, that's
Can we
duality.
become more mindful and more self-aware of what's happening in our minds at all times? And if so, is that a good thing? Or should we just accept the fact that we'll always have dark corners and periods of forgetting?
When we talk of balance, it means two things in balance, or maybe more, but so I guess in our relative experience, it seems that maybe we do have that it's not always the same dark corner.
So it seems to me, from what you're saying, that the forgetfulness or the distractedness is kind of built into how our minds operate. If it's something that's always there and just to be kept in balance.
Calling it distraction seems a little maybe judgmental.
So let's say, what would you prefer?
Relaxing and tight, holding it tight and holding it loose.
Okay. The name of the game when you get your first meditation instruction is keep one specific object in mind. Okay? Turns out you can't do it. You're told it's a really good thing to do because all kinds of wonderful things are going to happen if you can do it. You will be more relaxed, you'll be more clear, you'll be more open, you'll be more responsive to everything and everyone around you. And then all these super amazing things can happen down the road too. So it sounds like, okay, keeping one thing in mind and learning how to just put the mind somewhere and it stays there as long as I want it to stay there is a really good thing to do, but then you become distracted. So yes, there's a value judgment there. That's okay. So if we take the position that this forgetting of what we decided we were going to do with our minds is kind of built into how the mind works, then it's saying the whole enterprise of achieving one-pointed samadhi is it's a lie.
Hopeless. Hopeless.
Hopeless. Hopeless. It's just aspirational because. But it turns out it's not just aspirational, because people do achieve this and then they experience the benefits that are described. And then they go on to do all kinds of other wonderful things with that, what's called Xinjiang, or that total pliancy or flexibility of mind that does exactly what they intend at any moment. And all kinds of emotional stresses are cleaned away, and all kinds of physical pains and energy blockages are cleared away, and all kinds of other problems go away. So it is achievable. I know people who have that level of ability. You do as well, I'm sure. And so it's kind of giving up before we start to say the best we can hope for is to kind of keep things in balance and not have too much of a value judgment about it. Agree?
Well, I've never had that experience, so I don't know.
Not yet.
But I'll trust your
Not yet.
yeah.
So what would give you confidence that this is something that you can accomplish or worth accomplishing?
Oh, I have no doubt there'd be worth. Am I the only one talking?
You sat in the front. So.
And you put your hand up. Little did you know.
So you're not talking about when you can focus the mind like that, that's not the same as enlightenment.
No, that's not the same as enlightenment.
Well, I have no idea.
That's good. I think it's true that people generally are motivated to practice meditation because they do find it problematic that their minds give them a lot of trouble, and that they really experience themselves as having very little control over where their minds are going to go next, or what kind of pain and confusion their own minds are going to inflict upon them. And so there's seems almost implicit in that sense of the desirability of having a more workable, relaxed, and open mind that can be gently directed rather than being kind of the cruel taskmaster. Yeah. Okay, we won't pick on you anymore.
It's Namita.
Is it me?
Yeah.
I think probably coming back to what you asked originally, I was thinking, I'm trying to remember the question now, that it's okay to say in terms of, it seems like it's some kind of ego mandala coming in, that when the distraction occurs, if I'm sitting in meditation and I have a sense of commitment to something I discover in that moment, I'm kind of like not trying to think about the candle flame too much, but more about what it is that I'm experiencing in that moment of connection. And within that moment of connection, I engage with something that feels right and true. It's still quite new for me, so
Okay.
if you find the words. Then my sense is that there's a noticing all those years of seeing things in a way that fits, that may not be particularly advantageous to me, may not bring me great experiences, but the habitual part of it is so fixed, and it fits with this fixed view of the world, that by choosing to discover something else, by having a strong sense that there is, in all these teachings, and as you just said, the fact that there are those who have discovered it, that's why I'm there on the question, that, much to my amazement, simple as it may seem, there seems or parts of my ways of thinking seem unwilling to give up on that whole view. And so when I wander off and get, it's almost like it's a distorted view that I'm actually giving up something precious in order to let go into what I discover in that moment of concentration. And it's, I don't feel like this is all coming out very well, but I was really clear when I put my hand down. It's sort of, it seems like the distraction is about recognizing how powerful what it is I'm looking to let go of is, and how many deep levels it operates on.
Very good. Yeah, very good. So, if I understand correctly, and I think I do, what you're discovering is just how fascinating or important or significant all these other perceptions or thoughts arising in the mind strike you as being, and that is what pulls your attention in their direction, in contrast to where you had decided to put it in meditation. Yes?
Yeah, at the time.
At the time, exactly.
At the time.
It's like, I really should be thinking about this thing that popped into my mind just now because it's really important. Why? Because so many other times I thought it was really important, and so I have come to believe that it is important, which is why I keep thinking about it over and over and over and over again.
Well, and it feels good in this way. Sometimes
something is very
so
appealing
powerful.
to it. Yeah.
It feels good, doesn't it?
Mhm.
I'll follow that line.
Like a nice smell.
Yeah, yeah, I'm there.
What word did we use the other day for this?
Allegiance? No.
Something attractive about it, or
Seductive?
yeah.
We used another word. We were using another word, weren't we?
I said that
investing in it. Yeah.
Yeah, but earlier when we were sitting here, I said distraction is the unity of, I don't know, fascination and something. But anyway.
What concerns me about the way in which we use the word distraction, we use it in a very pejorative sense, as though it is a negative force in some way. That's how we often imagine it is. If you imagine what we want, a phenomenon we've all been through when we've driven a vehicle for many miles, focusing on something very important in our thinking, completely unaware the rest of our mind is busily actually doing its job, which is to notice what's happening on the road, to make sure you're not in a difficult situation and be ready to react. In other words, all that's happening actually is that if you're actually focusing on something which is very, very important to you, you're uncovering that particular aspect.
True, but then by definition, we wouldn't call it distraction.
Why do we call it distraction?
We call it distraction only with respect to having made a commitment to be putting our attention somewhere else and forgetting that we are no longer doing that. So there's the forgetting part that is critical to what we're calling distraction. It's not just that something else comes along and it seems interesting and important, because then if we say, okay, now I am going to give this my full attention because I did forget to return that phone call and I do need to decide within the next 3 minutes what I'm going to say when I return that phone call, and then I'll come back to this other meditation in 3 minutes. Then it's not distraction. It's changing the topic or focus of your attention. But if your mind goes somewhere else and you're lacking that reflexive quality of noticing or being aware, self-aware, that you have forgotten, or we can say getting lost in thought, forgetting completely that you're in this room with a body because your mind is in Azerbaijan or wherever it's gone, then it's distraction. If you hear a bird outside and you give it your full attention and you know that that's what you're doing, when you're doing it, it's not distraction, it's changing the object of your attention.
So it's only distraction when you actually don't know you're doing it. In which case, how do you recognize it anyway?
That's the question.
That is
isn't
the
it?
question. You don't know right away, but then at some point you do.
I mean, I'm a musician. When we perform, we're always aware of the risk of distraction. What we learn to do is to notice the distraction and to see it for what it is. And then we have to let it go because we know we can't actually continue doing what we're supposed to be doing at that moment, which is performing.
Sounds right. So these other thoughts can arise, and in that moment or in just a bare moment later, you notice that they have. So you're aware that some other phenomenon has captured your attention momentarily, other than where you had decided to put it. Then you make this vipassana kind of decision that it's not the priority, and therefore you are immediately going to let it go again and stick with what you had decided to do in the first place, right? And this becomes so habituated through training that it becomes second nature. And you can even say it becomes so strongly second nature that it's like your first nature. So instead of having the nature of getting lost every time some interesting thing pops into your mind, you have this nature of using that itself as the prompt to remember that in fact you prefer to be keeping your attention somewhere else. So this is a well-trained mind. It's like, think of it as like a child's mind. You say to the child, do your homework. Then someone walks in and puts a bag of candy down on the table. And immediately the child's mind goes, oh, candy. And it doesn't even think, oh, I'm not supposed to be thinking about candy. It's completely forgotten about I'm supposed to be doing homework. Completely forgotten. It's gone. Why? Because the content of that moment of experience has become so attractive, so interesting. It has triggered so many, desires, beliefs, hopes, etc., etc. Or maybe just it's the sugar speaking, I don't know. That there's this complete wandering away from or forgetting of that awareness that knows that there was something else going on a moment before that was important. That's what we're working with.
See, I'm not thoroughly convinced that we only can ever think of one thing at a time or focus on one thing. In fact, even as you were speaking, I was focused intently on what you were saying, but there were already other images in my mind that I was completely aware of, and I could discard them if I wished, or draw them if I wanted to.
Okay, I will assert and leave you to investigate whether those in fact occurred at the same time as listening to me or in moments in between. Because each of those options, as you investigate it, will entail certain consequences about how your mind actually operates, which will be very interesting.
Any other activity has different aspects. If you're doing an activity, there's an intellectual bit of your brain that's working, your mind is working. There's an emotional side that's operating and bubbling away there. There's the history of the knowledge of what you're drawing to that attention. So when we're actually thinking about one thing, and I'm intently listening to what you're saying, there's a lot of things happening. And I mean, to always talk about, or to tend to talk about them as merely distractions, is to go back to what I said at the beginning. It seems rather punitive to talk in that way, or pejorative to talk in that way.
Mm-hmm. That's an
There's an old
interesting
legend
point.
that a pilot I knew used to say, which was actually, he had it on the front of his cockpit, which said, in an emergency, first fly the aeroplane. Don't start doing anything else. Don't start panicking. Don't start thinking about what might or may not have happened. First of all, keep the aircraft level.
Okay.
And sometimes that's how I like to best think when there are so-called distractions. First, keep the aeroplane level. Keep where you are. Stay where you are.
I just wonder if I can interrupt, because this isn't a great conversation for everyone online, because I don't want to keep turning the camera around. So I'm just wondering if maybe we could move on from this particular point. And
Okay.
So is he talking with the audience?
it's not
Cutting out the
it's-
people online?
not entirely,
All right.
but it's at the moment all we can see is you two, and we can hear a distant voice in the background. So I just wonder if we could maybe move on.
To be continued.
Of course.
To be continued, right? But it is an interesting question, isn't it? I find myself fascinated with the complexity of what is able to appear in my mind. Like if there's something logistical that needs to be done, that whole world within which that logistic has to occur, it can't appear separately, otherwise the logistic wouldn't happen. So it can't be happening. I decided it can't happen in time. It must be some other way that it's happening, because it is so complex. It all has to be present at the same time. Or
Yes
time
and
inverted
no.
commas.
Yes and no. Because when we talk about cultivating these skills in meditation, we are deliberately limiting ourselves to that part of experience that can be related to intentionality, and can be specifically tied to the presence or absence of self-knowing awareness. And it almost raises a separate question of whether there are activities going on in the mind that are outside the domain or not within the space or the dimensions of those particular forces or activities. We talk about different samskaras or different mental formations, different consciousnesses. So the theory goes, only one moment of consciousness exists in any one moment. You don't get two. You don't get to hear something and smell something in exactly the same moment. This is the Buddhist view based on thousands of years of meditative investigation. But those are just the gross consciousnesses, right? And then there's the factor of attention, factors of mindfulness, and the core element of self-knowing awareness. But of course, there's all this stuff of which we are not aware because it's not part of the I am operating my mind now technology, such as stuff we decide to put away and think about later, and we have no thought whatsoever that we are thinking about it, and yet suddenly at a moment, oh, now I know what to do.
Yes.
So it's been kind of thinking itself, somewhere undetectable to the I who thinks it's actually the thinker, right? So these are very interesting questions, but they are not exactly the questions of what we can cultivate in meditation, which is deliberate, and what the process of that is, which is really what we intended to start talking about before launching into other things. But it's a very interesting thing.
So when you're saying distraction in this context, it's specifically what you said several times already, that you're intending to do one thing, and then without intending to, you're now not thinking about it, and then by some means that we don't know what it is, something happens that we come back, and that's what you're really getting us to notice.
Right. There's a loss of recognition of what the mind is doing in a particular moment. So the mental activity is there. The self-knowing quality that should go with that mental activity vanishes. Then it comes back again.
How?
Where does it go? Where does it come from? What can we do as intentional actors to make it easier to come back, quicker to come back more strongly? This is what we're trying to do in meditation. And then, is it me doing that, or am I just somehow one of the triggers, the thought of I want to remember what's going on in my mind? Is that just one conditioning factor or one trigger? Whereas actually deeper processes beyond, the agency of the I are also being kind of invoked that way. So this is something to investigate. It's not necessary to just form some theory about it, but it's incredibly valuable to see in one's own experience. because then you can decide to just think about all kinds of different things, and at the same time be well trained enough never to lose the thread of the continuity of your self-knowing awareness. And that's when we start to talk about being really accomplished in meditation. It's not that thoughts stop. You don't have your memory banks wiped. You don't become unable to plan for the future. Right? So these functions still exist in your mind, and in fact, they're enhanced. But something very fundamental shifts, something very important happens that makes it worthwhile to train the mind in meditation. Well, maybe that's as much as we need on that topic for the moment. I think it's interesting.
It's interesting because the way I'm approaching the same sort of question with my students in the Discovering the Heart of Buddhism is looking at the, for want of a better word, we call the heart wish. And the heart wish is not something that I've set my mind on as a strategy to, but why have I set my heart on it? What is that going to give me? What is that I'm really wanting? And going back to something more basic, so that, for example, in the meditation, what is that quality I'm longing for? Maybe it's peace, maybe it's ease, maybe it's connection, maybe it's compassion, maybe whatever it is. But there's some sort of, something's driving me.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought this up.
All right, okay, well, I'll hand it over to you now.
So just last weekend, I taught a meditation program at our center in New York. The first hour I spent talking about the fact that you need to really understand and be clear about why you want to meditate in the first place before you enter even a single session of meditation practice. You should have a clear sense of, why am I here? What is my understanding of how this works? What the benefits are? And what I need to do from my side to see that that's actually achievable and accomplished. And I said, and that is called your view. What brings you there, how you see your purpose, your motivation for engaging in the practice is going to shape, if not outright determine, what happens when you practice meditation. Because if you just think, if you don't even ask yourself this question and don't really have a clear sense of what your take on it is, what your personal feeling and perspective is about the practice you're doing, then you'll just kind of go to the same happy place every time and think, okay, that was my meditation. Because my mind got a little bit quieter, and that's good enough. You don't ask yourself, am I only looking for a little time out from my life in meditation practice? You just assume that. You don't have a very clear goal and purpose in mind for what you're trying to understand or accomplish, let alone how to go about it. So, thinking about what matters to you most in terms of working with your own mind. Are you trying to really understand something? Are you trying to achieve something? Are you trying to cultivate one experience to the exclusion of every other type of experience? What are you doing? Why are you doing it? And how does that fit with all the teachings that you hear or can read about what meditation offers and how it works and why it works, how to do it? So if I can kind of skip around a little bit. In general Mahayana vehicle teachings on meditation practice that I've read recently, this question of motivation and view or perspective is treated before the topic of meditation, like in Jemgon Kongtrul's treatise that I just taught last week. Then even in Tantra and Secret Mantra, if I'm allowed to mention that, When Mipam, you've heard of Mipam, many of you? Okay. When Mipam is teaching the most profound topic, which is called the Guya Garbha Tantra, he says there's 11 critical principles of secret mantra, and all of them hang together, and each of them contains all the others. They're all equally important, they're all equally profound, but nonetheless, there's an order to which you approach them and work with them and train in them. And again, first is the view. What is your current understanding of your own reality and the reality of your experience? What is the view of reality that is taught in the Dharma, and how do those two match or fail to match? And if they fail to match, and it seems desirable that they match more closely, how do you go about making that happen? Point number 2, meditation. After meditation comes conduct, and then all the so-called real, Vajrayana things like empowerment and samaya and sadhana and all of these things come after that. So whether you're practicing the general vehicle of Buddhism or Mahayana Buddhism or Vajrayana Buddhism, first get a handle on your view and your motivation, and then train in the discipline of meditation. And then you can explore. Then you can develop. Then you can work with all different kinds of skillful means in the context of your meditation and based upon your view to accomplish something. So I find this very, very significant. So I'm glad you brought it up. That what is your heart? What do you call heart wish?
Heart wish.
Heart
yes.
wish.
What is to really get in touch with that?
So if the texts and the teachings say you should want to achieve enlightenment for the welfare of all sentient beings, and then you sit down to do your meditation and you say, I should want all sentient beings to become enlightened, it doesn't feel very comfortable if what you're really there for is to calm down and not feel like your own mind is so threatening and dangerous to you, because it's liable to have all kinds of crazy emotions and thoughts at inappropriate moments that are counterproductive and stressful and create friction with other people. So if what you really want is at least to calm down a little bit and not overreact to things and learn how to discipline your mind to be aware and to notice things and not immediately jump to conclusions and not immediately be reactive, that's your starting point. That's what you're working on. And the view that at the end of the day of some process that is going to unfold, all sentient beings will be liberated from the cycle of samsara. Great. I'll get there one day, But if it's not today and you just say, I can't even get started because I don't feel that motivation, then it's a non-starter, right? I appreciate the teachings that say, I should have compassion for all beings. I should develop loving kindness for all beings. But let me start with one. Let me start with an easy case. Okay, now I know what it feels like in an easy case for my mother or my daughter or whoever. Okay, now let me pick a difficult case. Difficult case is actually only the second most difficult. The difficult case is someone who's already connected with you but stimulating all kinds of difficult emotions. What would it take to love that person, to have compassion for that person? And you really investigate that, yeah? Then the most difficult case is what? The person who you just don't care about. That's really the hard one. The person you pass in the road or at the supermarket, or who cuts you off who slows down at the yellow light, so you're stuck behind, you have yellow, green, and red lights here, yeah? The person right in front of you and the light is just turning yellow, so they slow down and you're stuck behind them. You're like, why didn't you just go through? They're not really the difficult person because they're just total strangers. In fact, if you, stepped out of your car and they stepped out of their car and you saw it was just some nice, sweet little lady, you'd be like, oh, I'm so sorry. So you don't have any judgment about them yet. Yeah? The people who are just kind of the furniture are the background players in the story of your own life? What would it take to have real loving kindness and compassion for them? How do you have to shift your view? Yeah. So
I was wondering if you were going to say the person that's most difficult to feel love for is yourself.
I wasn't.
A lot of people find it really difficult.
I think when it comes to the self, we occupy all three of those roles at different times. Profound self-cherishing, profound self-hatred, and profound indifference.
That's true.
It's not fixed. Yeah. So you can always pick yourself as the object, I guess, for any of those three cases. In the very traditional Mahayana teachings, both from our tradition, which comes through Gampopa from the Kadampas actually, and the Kadampa tradition as it goes through to the Gelugpa school, they talk about three types of individuals, like Chebusum Jilamrim. And at first I used to think it was all just a value judgment. There's the bad people who only want happiness in this life. Those are not really spiritual people. Then there's people who only want things to be better in the next life. So selfish, so small-minded. Then there's the great Mahayana people. They want everybody to be happy forever and ever and ever in every lifetime. And that's the reason that they practice. And we should all be that. That's what I used to think the teaching was saying. I've come around to the view that what it's really, and this comes first in the Lamrim, is like the first topic. The first topic. We all have something called the Rik, or the potential to attain enlightenment. Buddha nature, we would call it in other contexts. But with that potential, some people just want to feel a little better temporarily. Some people want to feel better in the long run, and some people want everybody to be happy. Three types of individuals. I've come around to the view that this is holding up a mirror to us and asking us to recognize what is our current starting point. What is our motivation? What is our view? Because that's what we have to start from. If we pretend to be some other kind of person with some other kind of view or motivation, it's a non-starter. We're always failing to measure up to some standard rather than working with our own actual experience, with our own view, with our own motivation. Yeah. So, anyway, what should we talk about next?
Well, I wonder if
do we need to take a break at some point?
Oh yes, do we need to take a break at some point? We've been going for an hour.
You look very sleepy. I think you need some coffee.
No, it's not going to happen.
Not you on the camera. I'm speaking to the cameraman behind the camera.
So do we want a bit of a fresh air break? Just let some fresh air in the room. What about you?
I could go a bit longer and take a break, or we could take a break now. I'm just trying to adapt to your preferences.
Anyone else?
You're nodding yes, take a break?
Carry on.
Oh, carry on, yes, carry
And they're at
on.
home, they can go to the
Yeah, they can, we wouldn't know.
Yeah, they can go whenever they want. It's good. Is it too cold for you open?
No,
I
it's
think it's
good.
good
I
open.
need
Yeah.
that pushed down. Sure. So what do you think about all that? Lamala?
All of that.
That last bit.
I suppose I was wondering to myself about the difference between thinking I want to practice in order to have a happier life, and a sense of a place in myself where that wish is coming from.
Mm-hmm.
But it comes out the same. So I was just kind of, I suppose I emphasize more finding that place in yourself, that a bit like you were saying with the, where does that come from, that coming back? And then what happens when I say wake? I kind of don't have any concept of what it means, but something happens. So it's the same, isn't it? Like, where did that come from? How do I know what that is? So I guess I just put much more emphasis on a kind of non-conceptual sense of where it's all coming from. But then in practice, it works out just as you're saying. It works out as, when I've wandered off, what happened, it's kind of inconceivable, but it's also, as you say, reassuring that actually if I align my intention to pay attention, if you see what I mean, it works. I'm more likely to come back, even though I don't know how that happened. Like you said, something's going on behind the scenes.
Yes.
Yeah. So I was kind of playing with what you were saying.
So the trick to this mirroring exercise, to deliberately and honestly look at what our view is, what our motivation is, what we hope to accomplish through engaging in some discipline like meditation. The trick is that if you are honest about where you are right now and work from there, you will become, through the process itself, the kind of person who's at that next stage. You don't have to try to jump ahead. You don't have to try to graft that on to the sense of who you are and what you want now. If you practice sincerely from where you are right now, the natural unfolding, the dharmata of the process is such that you will evolve and grow into the person who has that deeper or more expansive kind of motivation. It will necessarily happen by the way your own being is kind of constituted. Because if you think, simple example, if you think, I just want to escape from my suffering because my mind is just too much of a burden to carry around. I have to change something about how my mind is operating, right? So then you practice meditation, you calm down, you gain some clarity. You start to understand how that happened in the first place. What are these forces? We call them kleshas, we call, mental disturbances, emotional turbulence, right? What are the habits that keep arising that I wasn't paying attention to before? What creates them? What allows them to go away? You start to understand more and more and more about this process of your own mental experience. It's called understanding the causes of suffering and the causes of happiness. Once you start to understand more at that level, through your experience just growing, you understand how that is happening both to you and to other people who have the same basic structure of this mind. And your empathy for, which can grow into compassion for other people, naturally develops. It organically develops because you recognize this is what mind does. It's not so important that it's my mind or your mind. I simply recognize that this is what mind does. This is how it tortures itself. This is how it liberates itself. Feeling free and open and relaxed and attuned to things feels better for me. It seems to feel better for other people too. It's a good thing, right? So you grow into the Mahayana view. You grow into the Mahayana motivation. You understand the relationship of cause and effect and what's happening in your own mind. You understand at the same time that this is operating in other people's minds. You understand how the interaction of your two minds works based on those same principles. So you start to understand the interdependence or the interpenetration of your own experience and other people's experience. How we're always, as human beings, watching each other, mirroring each other, affecting each other in very obvious ways and in more subtle ways. So understanding the dynamics, the interpersonal nature of human experience opens up a huge world of bodhicitta, you know. And this is natural. This is why Dharma is about what is true in our experience. It's not just some theory that you impose on our experience. It's what you discover through investigating your own experience. Yeah. So it's fine to be whatever kind of being you are that has the motivation you have to engage in spiritual practice, because it will take you where you need to go. But if you have no particular motivation or no particular sense of your motivation, it's like riding a bicycle with the chain disengaged.
That's a good
You know?
image. Mm. So could we go from there to talking about the whole process of the role of the guru or the teacher in the pointing out and the meaning of transmission and
Okay,
where that leads?
let's start in an easy place then. Is it useful for you guys and gals to hear people like us talk about meditation in this way based on our own experience and study and reflection? Okay, this is what we need. We need someone who has developed their experience, their analysis, their study, their reflection, and who's made the effort before to cultivate these qualities through spiritual training, through meditation training, to be a guidepost or to be a reference point, a touchstone for how we can do the same thing, because our minds operate the same way. It's very simple, right? That's the starting point. That's why you form a relationship with somebody. You're saying, I see that you have figured something out that I also want to figure out because it will be very helpful to me. So I'm choosing to give you a little bit of leeway and trust in the sense that even though my way of thinking is such and you're telling me something different, I'll give you the benefit of the doubt that maybe you have figured something out that I haven't, and that the way I think of things and my own opinions and views, which tend to just keep me trapped in the same cycles and the same habits and the same confusion, are not the final truth of the matter, that there's more to it, and you or other people who've done a lot more of this have a better handle on that. And so I'm going to give you some leeway. Show me. This is the beginning of the relationship with the teacher. Because if we just trust our own opinions and our own egos and our own pride and our own set of personal experiences that have led us to here, and at the same time we feel like it's not enough, in fact we haven't figured out everything we want to figure out about life before we die, that there's more and it's important, then we have to allow for putting our trust in people who've taken that investigation further. No choice. I've been around some incredibly prideful and arrogant people in my life. I was a lawyer. Did you mention that?
Yeah, I didn't mention everything. Quite an eminent lawyer.
So, lawyers, okay, American lawyers, I don't know about barristers and all this, but American lawyers are trained to identify with a certain variety of quick-minded intelligence and analytic skill, to prize that above and to the exclusion of every other human quality, and compare themselves to everybody else and how much they have mastered that skill and how they can prove it to others. So the basic driving intellectual prideful motivation is of every lawyer, and it's encouraged by the system, is to prove that they know better than you do about whatever it happens to be. Are they happy? No, they are the most miserable people you could possibly meet. They become nicotine addicts, alcoholics, drug addicts, sex addicts, whatever, because their minds are torturing them with this never-ending quest to prove their intellectual superiority and maintain their position, their intellectual status relative to everyone else. And some of them are unbelievably childish. There's been no emotional, interpersonal growth whatsoever. They're just fixate on this one particular mental trait to the exclusion of everything else. And they measure all other people by that one trait as well. It's extremely painful and isolating way to live. How many lawyers did I know who wanted to study meditation with me? I was already a Lama when I started practicing law. How many? One or two kind of said they did, but they didn't really, and they never followed up, So there has to be something within you that is willing to recognize that your own strategy for being successful in life has not brought you the fulfillment that you want. And that these people who have practiced meditation for a long time and studied the Dharma seem to know a little bit more about this important thing than you do, and it's worth putting some trust and reliance in them. I was going to say something else funny about lawyers, but I forget. Oh, yes. Nowadays, apparently meditation is good for everything. But we just call it mindfulness. So there's military applications of mindfulness. There are people who teach meditation only to lawyers so that they can be more effective lawyers, and so on. That's not what we mean when we say meditation. Meditation means developing self-knowledge based on experience. It's a maturation of our humanness, of our being in this world, right? It's a process. Not just becoming better lawyers or technicians or musicians or generals.
So it's about meaning.
Right. It's not just about the raw power of your ability to concentrate and nothing else. The old scriptures say that if you develop only that one power of concentration, and you think that's the most important thing, you can spend billions of years living in some state of samadhi in a formless realm and derive no benefit from it whatsoever. You've just basically shut out the rest of the universe and you're just living in your one point. You're living in your one-pointed mind for 1 billion years to the exclusion of everything. It doesn't sound like such a great thing, right?
You missed the point.
You missed the point in that one point. So that's kind of where the mindfulness stuff is going. Sorry, John Kabat-Zinn. I like him, actually.
And Tara, because Tara's just come back from a week of training. What would you say?
But she's also here.
Yes, what would you say to that, Tara?
I would say it depends who's teaching mindfulness.
Yeah.
There's a lot of very good mindfulness teachers that it's much more than just single pointed concentration. It is the vipassana, and it is the compassion, and it is the meaning. But it does depend.
Of course. Yeah. This is kind of the reductio ad absurdum view of mindfulness training.
But so too often it is true, especially when it's being sold. Like mindfulness is the thing, this is a product that everybody's got to become mindful, so everybody jumps on the bandwagon, and it's bound to be, like you described it. People are going to pick it up as something they can use without any commitment to any kind of deepening of any sort.
I can teach anybody, if they're willing, I can teach anybody to be an excellent meditator in a week to 10 days in terms of just concentration, this kind of discipline of meditation. I could even teach them to teach other people the same skill in a week to 10 days, no problem. You can go to a yoga certification course and in 30 days learn the asanas and breathing, pranayama, etc., well enough to teach other people and be a certified yoga instructor. To become a Lama in our tradition, though it's maybe more flexible now than in the past. You spend a lifetime. You spend years of study and preparation and training and working with colleagues, with fellow practitioners, going through the daily grind and the daily process of seeing how you are actually functioning within your own mind and how you're functioning in relation to others and how you are managing the discipline of a spiritual life, right? And receiving teachings and contemplating them. And then at some point where it seems like you're sufficiently seasoned, you go into an actual Lama training seminary for 3 or 4 years. And if you really have potential after that, because you gain some experience, then you do it again. And maybe again, 9 years, 12 years, 15 years. And then, oh, there's a Lama. So there's a lot more to it than just learning one very specific skill with your attention and your concentration and then certifying, that now you've got that. We call this Dharma, we don't call it meditation. Meditation is a skillful means or a set of skillful means. Skillful means to do what? That's the question.
That's the question.
That's why the view has to come first. What do you want to do?